All right, so Ben Shapiro just reacted to the Burning Man situation. He said a few things that were, I think, pretty poorly justified and a few things that made some sense that I think are worthy of debate. So one of the weaker things that he said was that people shouldn't have been freaking out over the amount of rain that happened, given that it was only between half an inch and an inch.
I love this. More than half an inch of rain fell at the festival site on Friday, disrupting this year's half an inch? Not half a foot.
I think the response to that is that people weren't concerned that they were going to drown in the puddles. People were worried that their cars wouldn't be able to get out, which it turned out to be true, and that emergency service vehicles wouldn't be able to get in, or porta potties wouldn't be able to be cleaned. He also said that it's only 5 miles, so people should be willing to just walk that.
It's a flat desert. Take a little water and go like 5 miles. The winding, my goodness.
I think the problem with that is that people don't come with only a backpack. I mean, most people had a car, either a rental car or an RV. They had food and all of this stuff that they would bring with them to live for like a week or however long they were staying there, and they didn't want to leave all that stuff behind just to get out of there. So he does make a broader argument about the festival and what that means for how Americans conceptualize value that I do think is worthy of debate. So he and other conservatives kind of make the argument that Americans think of value in this very pleasure-centric, desire-focused way that's very hedonistic, and that's both bad for the country because it leads to people not having families and not focusing on work, but it's also bad for individuals and the future of their own lives. Critics, on the other hand, say that people don't go to Burning Man because it's exactly like the rest of their lives. They go to Burning Man as an escape. Then again, I just present the arguments from both sides. Which side do you guys think is right? Schools closed in Pennsylvania as a manhunt for a fugitive expands. So this guy, Danilo Cavalcante, escaped from a prison near Philadelphia. It wasn't like this guy was a low-level prisoner. I mean, he had been serving a life sentence for homicide. And a trail cam picked him up walking on this private property about 3 miles from the prison where he was formerly being held. So he was just walking between houses and there was a report of a robbery. So schools in the area, justifiably, are deciding to shut down for the time being. It is interesting because it feels like this kind of armed and dangerous fugitive on the loose, these stories just appear less in the news than they used to in the past. But I don't think it's because they're happening less. I think it's because we now just pay more attention to international and national news, pay less attention to things that are happening in our local communities. The NYPD just banned the practice of boxing in protesters. So I guess this is a practice. It's also called kettling, where officers go and they try to box in the protesters into a corner, whether it be against a building or even just against one wall, and then they just go through and arrest all of the protesters that they boxed in. And you might think this is all well and good, but a report from the New York Attorney General Letitia James found that officers used the containment strategy in which protesters were penned in by the police, then charged at or beaten with batons. So obviously not a great look, but let's look at arguments from both sides, both in favor and against the practice. So those in favor would say we should still allow officers to box in protesters. We should just stop them from hitting protesters with batons. They say it's an important tool in the toolkit of officers who are trying to quell civil unrest. And they say that if we take this away, it's very hard for officers to arrest people who are protesting illegally or trying to loot. So those who disagree say that this inevitably leads to more violence because the protesters still want to flee and not get arrested. So they're going to run through the officers instead of away from the officers, which will lead to more conflict. They also say it leads to grouping in protesters that did nothing wrong with other people that did do something wrong whom they're boxing in. And then everybody gets arrested and a lot of people get charged who shouldn't get charged. Again, I just present the arguments. Which side do you guys think is right? All right, guys, this has been episode 13 of Mealtime News. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Henry, and I'll see you mañana. Follow to hear more daily news and get the arguments from both sides.